Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another day in palette week, where every single day for 7 straight days I am posting some sort of palette themed content. And I'm very excited because today I have another episode in my Maggedon series. This was inspired by Kat and Haley. Kat does an Maggedon series, and Haley, I believe Haley O, does a testing all the eyeshadow palettes in my collection. I'll have both of their channels linked down below in case you're interested in checking them out. I highly recommend both of them. I have been going through my makeup collection, or sorry, my eyeshadow palette collection in reverse alphabetical order. I started late last year and we've worked our way into this year. Basically what I do is I go through all the palettes that within a series. So today it's just Natasha Denona, and my goal with each brand that I talk about, or each eyeshadow palette that I talk about, is that I've completed the palette no pan left behind, or all the palettes I'm kind of making decisions on, I've completed no pan left behind, meaning that I've used every single shade within that palette at least one time. That is not necessarily the case with today, and one, I have a huge Natasha Denona palette collection. There are so many shades within each Natasha Denona palette, but I'm also trying to take into consideration the palettes that I just have not been excited to even attempt to reach for. And never in a million years did I think that I would be capable of decluttering any Natasha Denona palettes, because for a while I was definitely of the collector's mentality when it came to Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes, specifically the Midi size palettes. I've been overwhelmed by my palette collection for a while, and I think this year, because I had a moment there where there were a few months that I really wasn't wearing makeup at all, and now I'm like trying to catch back up on like working my way through my collection, I'm just feeling so overwhelmed with choices every day of and things that I feel like I'm keeping in my collection just to keep in my collection, but I'm not excited to reach for them. And there's just no point in that, especially in today's day and age when so many new palettes are coming out all the time. I love to test and try new palettes on my channel. I have so many great palettes in my collection that I'm excited about, and so I don't need to keep everything. I don't need to have a full collection just to have a full collection, and that is where I'm at. So we are going to go through my collection today. I'll let you know what I'm thinking. I'm not necessarily like decluttering in this moment. I will have an end of year full eyeshadow palette declutter video, but this is going to set the stage for what you will see as declutters or things that I will be keeping. So if you're interested, stay tuned. First, if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel and you like palette themed content, like I said, I love testing and trying new palettes. I love just talking about eyeshadow. We do a lot with eyeshadow palettes on this channel. So if you love eyeshadow palettes as well, I hope you'll consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. Okay, I have 3 different sizes, actually 4, now that Natasha has a new size. I have 4 different sizes of Natasha palettes. What I think we're gonna start with is we're gonna go size by size, and I'm gonna let you know what palettes I'm for sure keeping and which ones are either for sure declutters or palettes that I'm on the fence about. And then palettes that I'm on the fence about, if I'm only keeping it for like 1 or 2 shades, we're gonna try and dupe those shades throughout my collection and see if we can do it. So I'm gonna start with my mini palettes from Natasha. I have 5 of them in my collection. So the first palette I have is the Natasha Denona Mini Pastel. I do like Mini Pastel. It is not my most reached for. Can we focus? It's definitely not my most reached for palette, but I do really enjoy this gold shade down here that kind of has a bit of a green hue to it. I honestly like all of the shimmers in this palette, and while I don't reach for this palette more than a couple times a year, it's still one that I like to keep around. So this one I'm gonna keep. I will also be keeping my Natasha Denona Mini Nude. This is one of my favorite palettes in my entire collection. In fact, I actually ended up repurchasing this because my other one was so battered, beat up, and just so damaged that it was falling apart, and I love this so much. I wanted to keep it in my collection. I love all of the shades in here. I feel like it is like a perfectly curated warm toned eyeshadow palette. I love the shade Sienna, which is one of those like golden shades that has a bit of a green hue to it. I love this palette. So this one is definitely staying. Then I have my Natasha Denona Mini Love palette. Oh, I realized I'm missing one of my minis. I actually have 6, not 5. Okay, Natasha Mini Love. I did complete this No Pan Left Behind earlier this year. And the reason I keep this palette around is for the one shade that has major pan in it. I used to love mauve eyeshadow looks, dusty pinks, dusty purples, and that's just like really not my thing anymore. I thought I would be wanting to keep this palette around for this shade right here, but when I used this earlier this year, this was a bit almost like crumbly on the lids and just seems like either it's not as good as it once was, or it just doesn't adhere to my lids that well. Although now that I say it, it's like one of those shades every time I think about decluttering this palette, I'm like, do I really want to though? Yeah, even swatched, it like doesn't even swatch very well. I don't know how well you'll be able to see how like, I don't know, I just feel like it swatches. Let me turn my lights down. Almost just like swatches patchily, and it just doesn't have like a smooth metallic texture to it. But I do love this shadow right here for inner corner highlights. Unlike the other Natasha Denona palettes, these are not like easy magnet pans that you can just like push in and out, because if it was, I would just pop this into like a singles palette. I don't really want to try like repressing it into something, although I love this shadow for inner corner highlight. Maybe I do just need to like repress that one singular shade into a single pan. It doesn't look like the most exciting, but on the inner corner, it is such a light kind of frosty shade that has just this really beautiful slight pink hue to it that just kind of like brings a little bit of pink out in a look. And I have just loved this. I do love that shade. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I am going to end up decluttering this, but I am going to take this shade and repress this shade into a single pan just so I can keep that shade in my collection, because it is one of my most used inner corner highlights in my entire collection. Aside from that though, this palette can get the boot. Then I have Then I have my Natasha Denona Mini Retro, which I absolutely love. I love all of the shades in here. My least used would probably be this one right here. The shade Galaxia though is one of my favorite shimmers, especially for just like an everyday special shimmer on the lids that still feels appropriate for the office, but like adds a little something special to the look. I love Galaxia. I'm honestly shocked I don't have a pan in Galaxia. And I just overall think this is such a beautiful mini palette. This is one I don't think you can get anymore, but if you could, this one kind of feels very beat up and like I would buy it again if I could, but I can't, so this one's gonna stay. The other two minis are both minis that I bought this year. So I have the Mini Gloom, which I will say is not my like favorite, but also like I do love the shimmers. I created a look with this that I just didn't love. It was a halo eye, and anytime I try and do a halo eye, it just doesn't turn out like I want, because my lids, I swear, just aren't meant for halo eyes. I was really impressed with the blue in this. I used to have the Mini Star palette, and the blue in that Mini Star is just so underwhelming. I was a little bit worried that this would be the same, but this is beautiful. I also really like the metallic pink here and the metallic kind of silver with a green reflect. I do think it's pretty. It is newer to my collection. This is one that I will also keep, and then I will absolutely be keeping my Mini Sculpt. However, I dropped this and the pans like did all fall. Oh yeah. I need to like glue them back in. I honestly think I'm gonna leave. I kind of want to, I should just glue them back in. I should just glue them back in. Super frustrating, but the black, I feel like I have black shadow everywhere because this one crumbles every time. I almost didn't buy this, and then I ended up buying it, and this is like one of my most reached for palettes this year. Definitely something that I will bring traveling with me. It is just a solid 5-pan all matte palette that I feel like is just perfect for all matte looks or creating a matte look that you can then pop a really beautiful shimmer onto. Love having this. That one's definitely staying. So of my minis, I'm keeping 5 and I will declutter 1. We can talk about my large palettes next because I won't be decluttering any of these. I have the gold, which is an all-time favorite palette in my entire collection. I love this palette so much. I've talked about this so much. I don't want to like drone on. You guys know I love the selection of matte shadows in here, and then I love that we have such beautiful metallics as well. Again, a favorite palette of all time in my collection, so definitely staying. Then I mixed, okay, this is what I will say. My Lila right now is a mixture of Lila and these shadows from the Biba, and this I don't like, but also Lila was my first Natasha palette ever, one of my like most high-end purchases, one of my first really luxe purchases. So I feel like Lila is something that I would keep in my collection strictly for the memories. Right now it's housing all of the shadows out of these two that are my least used. So then my Biba palette is a mixture of all the shades that I love from Biba and all of the shades that I love from Lila. I do really enjoy the Biba palette. I think it's such a solid, just like everyday basic B, warm neutrals kind of palette. Warm shadows, and then you had like the black and the gray as well that were a little bit more cooler toned. But again, this now is a mixture of what I love about Lila and Biba together. So all of my large Natasha palettes will stay. And then I'm obviously also keeping my two newest Natasha palettes to my collection. I have both Eye Sculpt Texture and Tone palettes. I have the soft and the dramatic. So far, I have loved these. I've gotten so much use out of the soft palette. I do really like the new size. I'll be curious to see if we get more of the Midi palettes or if we're like strictly going to this size. What's nice about this new size, I believe 18 pan versus 15, the size of the pans in here are the same size as the Midis. So if you are someone that likes to pop your shadows out and kind of mix and match and create your own custom palettes, it's the same size. So these are new. I'm really enjoying these. They're obviously staying. Then we get into my Midis, and I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I have 14 Midi palettes. I think the only Midi sized eyeshadow palettes that I don't have is the bronze and then the Roxa palette. Everything else I believe I have for Midi palettes. And this is gonna be so difficult, you guys. It's gonna be so difficult. I have some Midis that I love and I have some that I just don't really care about. And again, as I mentioned in the introduction, I've never really considered decluttering any of my Natasha Denona palettes until this moment. I feel like this is gonna be hard, but we'll see what we can make happen. So we're gonna start with the Natasha Denona Bloom, which is new this year, and I almost didn't buy this. I skipped the Roxa and I was really proud of myself for that because I was like, I don't need to collect them all. Then the Bloom launched earlier this year and I was like, I don't know if I need the Bloom. I don't always love peaches. Like, it's definitely not what I am excited about the most when it comes to eyeshadow tones. I much prefer browns in any hue, but I thought the shade Equinox looked so pretty. It was this shifty peachy pink sort of shadow that had some blue in it, and anytime there's a bit of blue, it's really hard for me to turn it down. I also thought the shade Lush looked really beautiful. Again, kind of like a peachy pinky orange golden shifty shade, another shade that style of shade just really gets to me. And I will say I was kind of shocked by how much I loved this palette. I was blown away by the looks that I created and loved. I feel like this kind of like pushed me outside of what I typically do and outside of my comfort zone, and I loved this one. So I'm actually very happy that I ended up picking this up, and the Bloom is one that will definitely stay. Next we have the Pastel palette. Pastel was on my wish list for such a long time, and then I got it and I just wasn't as excited about it. When I went to test and try this palette and complete this No Pan Left Behind, I found it very difficult to think of looks that I wanted to create. And I am not someone who loves like a mint shadow. I love an aquamarine, I love a blue, I love a green, but when it comes to like these mint sort of shadows, that is just not what I love. I'm also not like the biggest straight pink lover, especially like pink mattes. So this pink, also this red, I'm like, I could be talked into like this shade right here, and I think this is a fun kind of take on like a lavender shade. I also love Bubble, I love Limoncello, and I love Zest. So it's like a mix. But I also, like, I've had this palette, and granted, I maybe wasn't doing my makeup. Oh, I thought I saw a spider. Maybe I wasn't doing my makeup. I was doing my makeup in a different capacity the majority of this year, and I didn't reach for this at all. So I'm gonna set this aside, and I'm gonna see what I have in my collection that I can dupe the shades that I do like. And if I can dupe enough of them, I might end up decluttering pastel. I was not thinking pastel was gonna be one of the ones I was thinking about possibly getting rid of, so. Okay, next up I have the Natasha Denona Retro palette. I do really like the retro. Again, I'm not the biggest, like, pink is not my biggest go-to. And as I said, I used to be much more into a mauve tone look or a dusty pink and purple. So this is not necessarily like my everyday, but there are some really beautiful shimmers in here. The shade Glitz, Psychedelic, Helio, and honestly, even the shade Jude up here, I think looks so stunning. I do like a dusty pink from time to time. I will say, like, the shade Amara, Go-Go, Groove, and Rebellion, maybe not gonna be my everyday, not gonna be shades that I reach for on a very frequent basis, but nude mauve is something I could see myself getting a ton of use out of, especially in the cooler months when maybe I'm reaching for cool tones more frequently. Nude mauve would be a very beautiful one shadow in the crease and you're done. I also like the shade Vivian, again, for kind of a lighter dusty pink. And for me, I'm not ready to part with the retro. I still think I could get a lot of use out of this, and I am still inspired by some of the colors throughout this palette. So retro is gonna stay. Then I have the Xenon palette. Xenon is a palette that when this launched, I was like, girl, do not buy that. You don't need to buy it. Who cares about your collection? This is just not something that you're going to reach for. But I am one of the people that when I look into this, I don't just see like black and gray, I see blue. That is just like, I feel like Snowball has some blue in it. I feel like Ebb, Cygnus, like I feel like I see a lot of blue in here. And all of the like metallic, special, sparkly shades in here, I just thought were so pretty. Is this a palette that I reach for frequently? No, but I love the different textures and tones amongst the metallic shades. The mattes, I'm like, is there really any matte? Like the shade Contrail right here actually could make a really beautiful inner corner highlight. This is not going to be something I'm reaching into, especially for the matte set frequently, because I just don't do like a smoky eye with these tones all that frequently. But when I want something, when I'm playing around with blues, I can definitely see myself reaching into like Cygnus for like an outer corner. I think is so pretty. Snowball Gift right here with like a cool toned, even like a brown cool tone look. I feel like this would be beautiful over the lids. I think this is a palette that I just know isn't something that I'm likely going to reach for just this palette to create a look, but as a companion palette, I still think this makes sense to keep in my collection. So Xenon is going to stay, even though it's one of the palettes that I questioned the most when I bought. All right, next up I have the Love palette. The Love palette is a palette I lusted after for such a long time, similar to the Pastel palette. And then Love went on sale for like half off or cheap. And I bought it and I got it and I just was not inspired by it at all when I got it. But I've felt guilt over not loving it as much as I thought that I would. And I think when I look at this palette, the two shades that I'm like, okay, these are probably the two shades that I would keep this palette for the most. It would be the shade Giving here and then the shade Lifetime. Lifetime is like a, kind of like a yellow goldy peach with a bit of a green reflect running throughout. There it is swatched right there. It just doesn't look like anything special, especially like it looks so light swatched, especially when I think about my indie shadows and what I just love something that's a little bit more punchy and impactful on the lid. I just think using this is not going to be inspiring, and I can't tell you, like I'm not excited to reach into this palette. Like I'm not. The shade Giving looks like a really fun pink with maybe a bit of like gold running throughout. It reminds me of the shade that I swatched out of. It kind of reminds me of the Mini Love, but it doesn't swatch very impactful. It just, again, I don't know if I can turn my lights down to maybe like showcase what I'm seeing. It just looks so dull. It just looks so dull. So This is one that I thought about when I like was like, okay, this is like maybe the biggest motivating palette, like motivating factor that I would think about when I was like, okay, maybe it is really time to move on from some of these palettes. Because this is like almost one of those palettes, I don't want to say that makes me angry in my collection, but it's one of those that like I look at it and I'm like, I should love you, I should want to reach for you, but I just don't. And then I like feel angry at myself. Not like true anger, but you guys know what I mean. Anyway, Love is a for sure declutter. I don't even have to swatch these two. Like I'm ready to move on from Love. So that one is going to get decluttered. Next up, we have the Sunrise palette, which was the first Natasha Denona Midi palette and the first one that I owned. Mine's definitely squeaky. This is what this one looks like. I actually have a shade in this palette that has a pan in it. It's Laurel up here. And this palette is one that I am going to keep. Not gonna be my everyday reach, but for a sunset eye, and just like there's shades in here that like Awakening, Laurel, Dayspring, Azalea even, and Aster, like those actually make me happy to look at. Those look like shades that are giving me a little bit of inspiration, that maybe they're not going to be the most impactful punchy shadow on the lid, but I feel like I could get away with them for work, and I feel like they're shades that I feel like would make me look pretty on the lids. So this is one I'm not even questioning. Like I definitely do want to keep this, even though it's my oldest Midi in my entire collection. Then I have the Yucca palette, which absolutely is not getting decluttered. I love greens. I love kind of like a grungy color story. This one is pretty unique, I feel like, in terms of color stories for Natasha Denona. And this is something that just like makes me happy. I love the shade Plantasia. I like some of the different textures and tones we have amongst the metallic shades. I like the variety of color that we have amongst the different shades. I like that we have this like brighter shade up in the corner, and Yucca is one of my favorites, so definitely not going to be decluttering that. Okay, then I have the My Dream palette, and I honestly like don't know what I want to do with My Dream. I feel like I do know what I want to do, and I feel like what I want to do is declutter it, but I feel guilty about that because I feel like I should love My Dream. There's the shade Vision down here, which is oh my gosh, like a duochrome. Let me swatch that one. It's almost like a green to purple to like bronzy sort of flip, but I feel like I have similar shades to this in my indie palettes, and I feel like every time I've reached into this palette, I've like liked the looks that I've created, but it's been maybe a little bit more purple than I would want, or just a little bit more dramatic than I want, and I'm just never completely satisfied with the look. I still think that I can get pretty looks with this. And honestly, like the shade Thrill, I do like the shade Thrill, but Thrill is really just like a gold with maybe a bit of a pink hue to it. Like I definitely have Thrill in my collection. I don't need to keep Thrill. What about Babies up here? Like Babies looks really pretty too. And this one's a little bit more of like a thicker metallic. Okay, Babies is really pretty. There it is swatched right there. It's almost like a pinky bronzy gold. I do think that's pretty. I just also don't think it's worth keeping the palette for that one shade, and I don't think that looks so special and unique to my collection that I'm like dying to even find swatch dupes to it throughout my collection. I think I'm okay getting rid of My Dream, you guys. I think I'm gonna move on from My Dream. Okay, we're gonna do it. We're moving on from My Dream. Okay. The Golden palette, I think we know, is staying. I absolutely love the Golden palette. It is basically the Midi version of the large gold palette. I do think they missed an opportunity to put in some of the like green, like lime chrome, should have been in this palette. But I reached for this earlier this year and no pan left behind it again. I did it this year and last year, and I loved reaching for this. I feel like this is a great tool to have in my collection. It's a great companion palette, again, if I want to use this for the mattes and then use like an indie shadow all over the lids. I love having golden, so golden is gonna stay. So is the I Need a Nude. I love this palette. Again, a great tool, a great companion palette, also just a beautiful palette on its own. I like that we have a variety of different textures and tones. We have some thinner lid topper shades, then we have the really beautiful kind of thicker chunky metallic in Muse, and I just think this is a beautiful palette. I love the I Need a Nude. And I think we also know I love I Need a Warm, so this one's also staying. Love the mattes in here. I definitely think it's more like neutral brown mattes with a couple of warm brown mattes sprinkled in. We do have a duochrome up here. It's kind of like your just standard red, green, gold shifty shade, but I still think it's beautiful. I like dynamism down here because it's one of those like bronzy gold shadows that has a bit of a green shift to it or brings out a little bit of green, which I love. And I love this entire row of metallics too. Perfect for every day, something that you can wear to the office, but you can also really build this up to be something really glam and beautiful. So this one's staying. Then I have my Zendo palette. This is a palette that I just was extremely underwhelmed with personally. I remember this launching and I was so excited about it, probably because it had a little bit more color than we were typically used to seeing in Natasha Denona Midis, but I just feel like this one really fell flat in terms of quality. And when I look at this, the only shades that I feel like I would consider keeping this for is the shade Yama, which again has a bit of green. Are we even surprised? And then Sensei, I think, is a really beautiful, deeper bronzy metallic, but overall, I just look at this palette and think it's a letdown, so I'm good to move on to Zendo. I'm actually really surprised. I feel like I was gonna need to set things aside to like swatch dupes for more, but I like really feel okay about 3 of the 4 that I am ready to move on from. I am not ready to move on from my Glam Midi. This is something I pushed off purchasing for a while, but then when I saw this in person, I thought it was beautiful and I thought it was something that I again could use as a tool in my collection. And I think this is a great palette for every day. I also think this is a great companion palette. I have loved reaching into the mattes in here and then pairing it with some of my like JD Glow singles, like Good God. I created a look with this palette and Good God all over the lids that I loved. I think this is beautiful. I just think this is so perfect, again, for every day. You can really lighten it or kind of sheer it out for the office, but then you can really build this up to be a very dramatic glam look as well. And I do love the Midi Glam. That just leaves me with the Natasha Denona Retro Glam. And I will say, I look at this and I just am not inspired by this color story, but I've created looks with this palette that I love, that I've gotten compliments on in my real life. And so that's where I struggle with this one. I think the shades that I love in this the most would be this one right here, which is kind of like almost like a Tiffany blue. Ooh, that is really pretty. That is really pretty. And I'm like, do I have anything that's like that pale blue in my collection? I don't know. I also like the shade Oscar for kind of like a satin taupey metallic. And then I do think Flutter is also really beautiful. Aside from that, I'm like not trying to keep this for anything. Let me swatch Flutter. I know I love Flutter. There's Flutter swatched right there. Flutter is just like a really beautiful kind of like white champagne-y metallic that has like a bit of like a twinkle to it. And then Oscar, which is more of that like satin taupe. It's pretty, but I'm like, okay, I don't need to keep anything for Oscar. I'm curious if I have, actually, I think probably most close maybe to that lighter blue. I'm just curious how it swatches against Blue Sapphire from my KVD palette. Blue Sapphire is definitely not gonna be the same. And I feel like Blue Sapphire is getting really old. There's Blue Sapphire and there is Palladian. I'm also like, okay, hold on. Is there something in my Blend Bunny Garden of Stars? Ooh, maybe not. I was like, am I really gonna swatch? I haven't even swatched this yet. It's just too beautiful to dip into. I will dip into it, don't worry you guys. Okay, I have also from Blend Bunny, I have the Efflorescence palette, and this looks like it has maybe 2 blues. We have Ripe down here. Ooh, Ripe is really pretty. Definitely not like the same. I don't know how well you'll be able to see. There's Ripe and there's the shade out of the Retro Glam. Retro Glam definitely has more of like a white iciness to it. And I'm like, what am I really keeping? Like, what am I really using this for? Probably just an inner corner. Probably not all over the lids. I also kind of want to swatch Loom, which might be like a more intense blue. Yeah, that's more like a UV purpley blue. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think in like that minimal swatching or minimal hunt, I don't think we necessarily found a dupe for the shade from Retro Glam, but just looking at this, I'm like, I don't need to keep this palette for that. I feel like the only time I'm reaching into Retro Glam is when it like rolls into a project for No Pan Left Behind. So I think we're good. I think we're good to pass along Retro Glam. Which just brings me back to the Natasha Denona Pastel. So, Natasha Denona Pastel. I'm gonna wipe my hand off. What am I gonna get out? What do I care most about? I think what I care most about is Bubble, Feather, Zest, and Limoncello. Let's start with Limoncello, which is the yellow, because I'm sure I have something similar. I have a lot of pale yellows that I do really love. Okay, there is Limoncello. I have my actual ColourPop Limoncello palette. ColourPop Limoncello I think is more, yeah, way more yellow. Not quite that pale baby yellow. All right, I'm pulling out my Vizier Soleil Le Plug palette. Oh, this has gotta be pretty close. We have this shimmer right here. It's gotta be pretty close. The Limoncello shade though from the pastel is beautiful. Okay, oh, those are pretty close. This one might even be a little bit more intense. Again, I'm sorry you guys with my lights if it's not the best. I actually think the one from the Limoncello, I think the one from the pastel is like a little bit lighter, but so close that I feel like we don't need to keep pastel just for that sparkly Limoncello shade. So we're good there. The rest are mattes. So I'm gonna swatch Bubble here, which is a really beautiful kind of periwinkly blue. It is one of the like cream to powder shadows. There it is swatched right there. I'm gonna immediately go into my other pastel palettes in my collection. Possibly the closest I would have would be from my Pastel Pup, and I think Ice Cap might be pretty similar. Ice Cap might be a little bit more purple, I guess. Oh, those are, actually Ice Cap might be almost a little bit more blue. There are those two swatched right there. They are pretty similar. Like on the lids, are you really gonna tell a difference? Also, how frequently am I reaching for these shadows? Maybe once a year. I also feel like in the Escape Pod there might be something. Oh, maybe that's definitely a lot brighter. Like Clarity Somber Amazing. No, there definitely isn't. Definitely the closest. Like, is there something in my Bella Beauty realm of fairies? Maybe not exactly, but I'm curious about this Periwinkle shade. Ooh, that is so creamy to the touch. Periwinkle is definitely more purple, but I feel like I don't need to keep, I feel like Bubble is close enough to Ice Cap. Like I feel like I don't need to keep Bubble for that. Feather, I'm like, okay, Feather is this really beautiful light pink that almost has like a touch of lavender, but I feel like the only other one I like really would miss is Zest. But then I'm like, would I actually, because when do I actually think about this? Zest is, again, kind of like that cream to powder formula. You guys, I really did not think I would even consider getting rid of my pastel. So the fact we're sitting here is a miracle. But what do I have like that? I'm actually gonna swatch it against the bright shade up here in Yucca, Camu Camu. Okay, Camu Camu is more yellow, not quite as green, and a little bit brighter, but what? Oh, I just had another one in my head. Oh, okay, Bella Beauty Bar Ocean Jewel. We've got and these probably are gonna be a little bit brighter. Let's see, Luminescence, the more green of the two. That's very green. I feel like if I'm reaching for a neon, it's usually on the inner corner, and I want something more bright neon than pastel. I think we just need to move on from pastel. I don't think I would feel bad about it. I don't think I would really, like, I don't want to say remember, but I don't feel like I don't think about this palette. So I actually think we can move on from pastel. Because all I've really felt is like a little bit of disappointment from pastel. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. The outer packaging is very cute though, but I think we're gonna move on from pastel, and that means that I'm keeping, is it 9 midis? Is that really it? Do we have one behind me? Okay. I'm keeping 9 and decluttering 5 midis, which is like a third, which I'm so proud of because I never thought I would get to a place where I would even feel okay decluttering any of my Natasha Denona Midi palettes. So the fact that we are sitting here okay doing this, I feel really good about that. So, whew, we did it. We were decluttering 6 things from my Natasha Denona palette collection. So you will likely see these in my end of year palette declutter as declutters. Stay tuned for that. But that is going to wrap it up for today's Maggedon. Let me know if you have any surprises. Let me know if you have any that you would have decluttered. Let me know that if you have any that you would have saved. Let me know if you've recently decluttered any of your Natasha Denona palettes. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting me and my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.